Welcome to the Henry George School for another exciting evening. This time, we are going to be experimenting with a format that we haven't done before, and it's going to be on the topic of AI. So we call it AI, Curse or Blessing for Humanity. So this is going to be a debate with two sides, each of them holding two different views on a very hot topic. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. But before I do that, I would like to explain a little bit about the rules. It's not going to be obviously a lecture, but we will have our debaters, each of them introducing the topic and making their own case statement. So that's going to be phase one. And after that, there will be what you'd call a rebuttal phase. So each of them will go after the other side's argument, trying to debunk it. So the audience will be invited at some point to ask clarification questions. And if you are asking questions, be sure to identify who you are asking it. So after that, there will be the synthesis phase, where each debater will come summarize his point again, learn from the questions that were asked by the audience, but also taking into account the counter argument from the other side. And after that, we will do a poll. But before we start, I would like to initiate a poll to see where do you stand on this question? Because I know AI is a big topic. It affects everybody, not just those who write the codes, those who make money out of it, or those who, debate about it. So we would like to do a quick survey to get your opinions. So let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. So James Cusick. James is an independent IT consultant specializing in software engineering and cybersecurity. Previously, James was a senior director of IT strategy and operations and distinguished engineer with Wolters Kluwer. Earlier, he held leadership and technical roles at Dell, Bell Labs, and AT&T Labs. James is currently a visiting associate researcher at Ritsumeikan University in Japan and a former adjunct assistant professor at Columbia University's Department of Computer Science. James has served as a board trustee at the Henry George School of Social Science since 2020, where he researches topics in innovation and economics. He has published over 100 papers and articles and 2 recent books on IT. He is an IEEE senior member, an IEEE Computer Society Distinguished Contributor, and a recipient of the IEEE Japan Medal. So our second debater is Tom Rossman. Tom spent his career investigating how people around the world can think and interact more effectively. As a young executive in finance, he was an early champion of emerging markets, investing in newly emerging markets far ahead of the crowd. Following communism's collapse, Mr. Rossman took a key role in bringing American capital and investment to the developing markets of the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, Turkey, and North Africa. Mr. Rossman studied religion and history at Nyack College and did his master's work in international relations at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. He is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Henry George School of Social Science, New York. So we have 2 outstanding members of our Board of Trustees who will be debating tonight on the question of AI. So let me begin by just asking you if you agree that AI is a curse for humanity. Would you please just raise your hand, and I'm going to do the count. Let's get to the meat of it. James, you want to start first, right?
Sure. Thanks very much for the introduction. and also the opportunity to participate in this dialogue. And just my first comment is I have a tremendous respect for Tom and his experience and views. And I'm very happy to have a chance to partner with him in this discussion. To get started with, I want to share a quote from Marvin Minsky. This is not the economist Minsky, but the AI inventor Minsky, who coined the term artificial intelligence at a conference at Dartmouth University in 1955. So I'll just read the quote to you. It says, "No computer has ever been designed that is ever aware of what it is doing. But most of the time, we humans are not either." So I think what we can start with is the understanding that many machines appear to have some type of intelligence to us. And we can talk about that further. We don't really have actual AI machines in terms of machines that are sentient. So we'll talk about that. But the way I'd like to approach this, just to get started, is more from a Georgist kind of angle. So if we talk about humanity, which is really about the aspects of human nature, such as love and compassion and empathy and kindness, then actually Henry George was a very strong humanist. And in fact, one of the primary elements that he focused on was equity, because that requires empathy and kindness, and it provides many societal benefits. So that's the way I'll think about this a little bit and discuss how AI promotes humanity through a view of equity. And I'd like to proceed with just a couple of questions, three questions. First, I'd like to discuss whether or not this is really a threat to AI, to our humanity, and to the equity of our societies. Secondly, I'd like to discuss how we know what is going to happen in the future. I think this is a very important question, and I'm not sure that any of us really know. Third, I often talk about tools, as you may know, and AI is just another tool. And the question is, what makes AI different than the other tools that humans have made in the past? Now, I just want to pause for a second and introduce some of my biases here so that you're aware before I make these statements. So first of all, I have spent my career designing and building and operating software systems, primarily computer systems. So this influences the way that I see this entire topic. I come to this topic more from a pragmatic kind of practitioner's view than kind of an abstract societal view. So it's important to understand how I kind of what my bias is there. The second bias is that I continue to participate in computer science research, including applying AI technologies to current problems in society. And I do believe that these technologies are helping us. So that, again, is my starting premise and my bias. Now, going back to the history here, I just want to mention that in the 1940s, there were essentially zero jobs in digital computing in the world. The first binary digital computer was actually invented and built here in Manhattan in 1935. And it was actually in a kitchen table setting. Somebody built out of spare parts the first binary computer. So there were really no jobs at that time in this field. However, today, more than 5% of the entire US workforce is directly engaged in computing employment. And as a result of that, the investment and the innovation have, just, exploded across the country and the world, and had many positive economic effects and lifted people into the middle class and higher, not just the United States, but in China, in India, in many other countries too. So this has translated into more equity and better living conditions for many people. Now, with AI, AI trailed the invention of digital computing by about a decade. As I mentioned, Minsky founded the field essentially in the 50s. And over the last few decades, employment has grown. There have been periods where AI has shrunk back. There has been periods where it kind of ran into a dead end and then it had to reform. But as we see today, there's a resurgence in AI, and I expect that there will be continued growth, and there will be continued employment and investment and expansion. And this also brings equity opportunities for people. Now, as far as predicting the future, I just want to say that I, along with, I think, everyone, has some limits in this area. There is a famous quote from a Danish politician of the 1930s who said, "It is difficult to make predictions, especially about the future." So with that in mind, I took a quick look at the last 120 years of technological predictions, and I found a pattern. And the pattern is that the predictions center around what is hot at the moment. So, for example, when automobiles were introduced, the future predictions were all about automobiles, right? When the airplane was introduced and popularized, it was all about how everybody was going to have an airplane or a flying car or something like that. Now, we don't have flying cars today generally, and maybe a few people do. And that hasn't really held us back, I don't think. And the research in this area shows that predictions about technological futures basically have a 50-50 success rate. So what I would say is that with AI, the challenge is to know which 50% of the predictions you should pay attention to, whether it's positive or negative. Turning to tools, so as we all know, humans have made tools for centuries and tens of thousands of years, and tools have essentially brought us to where we are. They helped us to survive, to thrive, and to evolve. And there are many types of tools. One that I want to focus on, though, is astronomy. So astronomy is a very intellectual tool. It is not like a carving tool or something like that, but it was invented eons ago, and it was actually the first science in human history. And the reason that it's important is that it was through astronomy that we learned when to plant, when to harvest, and how to feed ourselves. And so this is an interesting analog to AI, because AI is a very abstract kind of concept for many people. But tens of thousands of years ago, the sky watchers, as they were called, were high priests, and no one knew what they were doing or how they could figure out that the solstice was approaching and it was time to harvest, right? So I think this is very important. A simple example for today's world is if you want to fly from New York to Rome, you really don't need to know much. You just have to buy a ticket, take a taxi to the airport, lay back in your chair, and you will arrive in Rome. And now you don't need to know anything about navigation, about fuel supply, about lift or trim or anything else. You don't need to know how to fly that plane. Why? Because thousands of people are taking care of that for you. So AI is very similar. There is a lot of, let's just call them the high priests of technology somewhere behind the scenes, behind the curtain. And we, as regular folks, may not really understand what they're doing, but they're there to help us and they're there to serve us. So going back to equity, like I said, I believe AI will generate more and more jobs. It's already doing that, and that has provided many equity opportunities. When we look at the numbers, there are predictions. Again, keep in mind we don't know the future, but there are predictions that in the United States alone, 31 million jobs will be eliminated by AI, but also regular old fashioned automation, process automation. So it's not all about AI. At the same time, 33 million jobs are expected to be generated by AI, whether in the AI industry or supporting industries. So this is a 2% gain in employment. Not bad. So is that positive for people? Is it negative for people? I'll let you decide. But if equity leads to a more humane environment, then expanded opportunities due to AI innovation, I believe, will better support this. So concluding, I just want to say that technical progress in society, by its nature, does both disrupt and improve our circumstances. So if you were a owner of a buggy whip factory in 1900, you would be doing okay. But 15 years later, you would be out of business. So you need to transition, right? And this we all know. So we have to think about how to support individuals in society through that transition, and how is that going to shape our new world. I do believe it will land us in a more equitable space, but it does require some governance and it does require some cooperation, and we have to avoid sort of the run for the money and at all costs, right? That's not ideal. Finally, I would just say that in my own case, I am not afraid of AI because I know where the power switch is on my computer. Thank you. Tom?
Yes, thank you, James. I absolutely concur. I am a very good person, so we're on the same page there. No, but in all seriousness, James, I have a tremendous amount of respect for James, his intelligence and his commitment to the cause of making the world a better place is very obvious. And so I absolutely concur that it's a pleasure to participate in this debate tonight with him. So and in fact, I fully agree with everything that he said about AI having the potential to improve life as we know it and experience it. However, the problem is that's only half the story. It's in fact, it's a very narrow, one-dimensional, linear view of the issue. And in fact, when I hear techno-humanists like James give a presentation similar to this, and I've heard dozens over the past few years, as I've attended a lot of conferences from NASA to other tech conferences as well. You know, I always get this image in my mind of the Greek myth of Icarus. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Icarus, essentially his father was a man by the name of Daedalus, and he was an inventor and master craftsman. In fact, he was a technological genius of his age, and he fashioned wings out of feathers and beeswax so Icarus could escape prison. But then he warned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun. And of course, despite those very prescient warnings from his loving father and technical expert, Icarus did exactly that. And of course, the wax melted, as we all know, and he fell into the sea and drowned. Now, the techno-humanist crowd believes that AI will bring on a utopia, and that will give us wings to escape all of the problems of our day. But like all utopias, it will end in, I believe, very clearly as we look at the evidence, and every other utopian dream, in a disaster. So there are two very important problems that AI presents. One is that by creating a new entity that we cannot predict, cannot understand, cannot control, we are ushering in an existential crisis for humanity. Now, granted, this is something that no one can predict, as James mentioned, with any certainty. But the fact is that major experts in the field have already openly recognized these risks. It is, and it's something that we cannot ignore as a very strong possibility, if not probability. The only argument that techno-humanist crowd have to offer to counter this very real and present danger is sort of some kind of vague promises that, oh, it won't happen and there won't be any problems. But throughout history, whenever a group of people who have had enormous financial gain at stake assure everyone else that nothing bad will happen, it always does. For example, we were all told by the experts that computer generated derivatives models and computer generated financial risk models were so sophisticated that nothing bad could happen. Yet their collapse sent our financial system and economy crashing into the sea. Where was Daedalus then? Many leading AI experts and entrepreneurs, such as Jeffrey Hinton, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Mustafa Solomon, have publicly warned, and I quote, AI could destroy our civilization. A 2024 article by Joshua Bengro, Hinton as well, and many others warned that AI could result in, and I quote again, a large-scale loss of life, the biosphere, and marginalization or even extinction of humanity. In a 2023 survey of 2,778 AI researchers, more than one-third of them said that there's at least a 10% chance of AI leading to human extinction. Not human suffering, human extinction. Now, think about that 10% phrase or 10% number. If a pilot greeted you at the front of a plane as you were boarding and said there's a 10% chance that this airliner is going to crash and you will die a painful and horrible death, would you board that plane? So in 2023, to continue on, 30 governments, including the US, UK, and China, signed the Bletchley Declaration, on AI, which recognized that there is a potential for significant harm, either deliberate or unintentional, from AI. And that's a very important nuance that they included a non-deliberate outcome that is very negative from AI. So further, in 2023, industry leaders from OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and Anthropic, and other AI labs warned that AI could be as deadly as pandemics or nuclear weapons. Now, even if AI doesn't destroy human civilization, AI is creating one of the most overwhelming and highest concentrations of power that the world has ever seen. And if history has shown anything, it is that these imbalances of power and concentrations of technological superiority always end badly. Forget the Iron Curtain. We're looking at a silicon curtain that could divide the world up into far more destructive camps. And then as AI advances, the silicon curtain could reestablish itself as a contest between AI and humanity. Think about this, folks. We are creating a new species. In the words of one AI expert from Europe who also co-wrote the UN's upcoming report on artificial intelligence, an alien species, in the words of this expert. And that foreign entity is something that we can't predict, we can't control, and we will be massively inferior to in every single way. Now, let me share with you the really bad news. And I say that really bad news, not because human extinction is not terrible, but because it is a probability, if a possibility, if not a probability of happening. The thing that I'm going to talk about now, the new road to serfdom, is something that has a near virtual certainty of happening. And in fact, it's already happening right now, as I will explain. AI, the new road to serfdom. There is absolutely no question that AI will massively replace human workers on a scale never before imagined. 78% of US workers are employed in the services sector. 95% of that 78% will be replaced by AI over the next 10 to 15 years. In fact, according to Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, these jobs will begin to disappear en masse within the next 5 years. Now, let's look at the logic here. It is very simple. Every single skill set that humans have, that experts have been declaring would not be able to be replace humans, by computers. AI not only is doing massively better in the future, but it's actually doing better right now. Emotional intelligence, empathy, concern, understanding, creativity, sales and customer service. There's a really interesting example. Bill Gates was on a webinar recently with two tech experts, and the tech expert told the story of a CEO of a major tech company that came to the head of sales and said, "What's the most time-consuming thing that your salespeople have to do?" And he said, "Easily, it's writing follow-up emails." So he got his AI team together. They wrote an AI program to write follow-up emails automatically for their salespeople. And after it was implemented, the CEO then came to the head of sales and said, "Fire half your workforce." Think about that. Fire half your workforce. Now, in the 1980s, computers could not beat human beings in checkers. So, as James said, it was very rudimentary. And in fact, they predicted that they wouldn't be able to beat human beings in chess. In 1997, of course, as we all know, Big Blue beat Kasparov. Then the computer experts said, "Okay, we'll give you chess, but they'll never defeat a human champion in Go." And in 2015, there was an AI program that beat a Go professional. And since that time, they've had Go champions also being beaten by a program called AlphaGo. So throughout history, there's always been a tension between those who own capital and the workers. Workers only got their rights and better working conditions and better pay when they had the power to organize and demand those rights and that fair treatment and conditions. AI will tip the balance of power permanently. Billions of people around the world, in the words of Yuval Noah Harari, will be military and economically useless. Now, if you feel that I'm being histrionic or hyperbolic about this, there are hundreds of books and thousands of white papers that I could point you to, but there's one particular article that I think is a really good example of this phenomenon. 2019, Evan Roos, who's a tech writer for the New York Times, went to Davos and wrote an article called "The Hidden Automation Agenda of the Davos Elite." The first line of his article is very telling. "They'll never admit it in public, but many of your bosses want machines/AI to replace you as soon as possible." Now, in public, these executives were all wringing their hands about replacing their workers and some bizarre concept called human-centered AI, which doesn't really exist. But behind closed doors, they were bragging to their fellow corporate titans of all the enormous profits that is to be made by replacing 95% of their workforce. They see AI, and again, I quote, as key to whittling down departments of thousands of people just to a few dozen. Now, in the words of Mohit Joshi, who's the president of Infosys, which is a large outsourcing and technology company, and I quote, "Earlier, they had incremental 5 to 10% goals in reducing their workforce. Now, empowered by AI, they are saying, why can't we do it with 1% of the people we have?" 1%. Think about that. Kai-Fu Lee, another AI expert, predicted that 40% of the world's jobs would disappear within the next 15 years. 40%. That was 5 years ago, folks. And that was also before some of the more recent exponential leaps in AI sophistication. Now, you may be thinking and have heard that new jobs will replace the old jobs. And of course, this worked fine for 200 years from the Industrial Revolution. But the AI revolution isn't the Industrial Revolution. First of all, the Industrial Revolution replaced very low-level productivity workers, farm workers, people who worked at home, women who spun yarn and cloth at home on wheels, on spinning wheels, cottage industry. And those low productivity workers just moving into factories meant there was a wealth creation effect that helped drive the Industrial Revolution and industrialization of the world in the last 200 years. But today, for the first time, we have highly productive workers who are going to be replaced in mass. Remember the 1%, right? Secondly, the assertion that techno-humanist crowd also asserts, it hasn't been true for a very long time. Manufacturing employment in the US, once a bedrock of middle class life, has declined from 28% in 1960 to 8% today. Going from a good paying manufacturing job to a shopping cart wrangler at Walmart is not as apples to apples employment. So yeah, AI can create a lot of employment, but it's not going to create the high level productive employment that is required for society to become more prosperous. The opportunity for a 40 or 50-year-old accountant, actuary, paralegal, software engineer, salesperson to retrain and re-enter the workforce in a new career is not realistic. Now, the average full-time worker, to put this into context, the average full-time worker in America before COVID had a pay increase of 0.1% over the past 40 years. And the wealth and income inequality that we have today has reached proportions that would make Gilded Age robber barons blush. AI will put these trends on steroids and will result in what I call the new road to serfdom. I recently attended a NASA AI forum and I asked Dr. Omar Hamlish, the director of AI for the Goddard Space Center, what sectors would be most impacted by AI? And his response was, Tom, all sectors are going to be drastically affected by AI. In fact, Dr. Omar recently wrote a book called This Time is Different, When AI Transcends Humanity. And that's really the point here of everything that we're talking about. The main point of this is that techno-humanists and corporate elites put technology over human beings and over humanity. And in fact, if you believe Elon Musk and his crowd, over civilization itself. They are flying too close to the sun, and we are all headed into the sea. Just like the Titanic, there will only be enough lifeboats for the first class passengers, aka the 1%.
Thank you, Tom. So, done, right, Tom?
Yes, I'm finished.
Excellent. So, we are going to ask the audience to, if you have questions, to either James or Tom, to write it down in the chat. So I will take it from there and read it for you. So the purpose of this exercise is just to make sure you understand the points that have been raised. So if you don't ask a question, I'm going to assume that you understand, so there is no need to clarify any of the points. In which case, we will just move to the second phase, which is the rebuttal phase. And I guess James is going to go first.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tom. That was certainly entertaining. I'm not sure how much of the story is actually tied down to reality, because you're kind of flying high with that whole trajectory, like Icarus. But no, I think you make some excellent points. I mean, I cannot disagree that the inequities that we see are certainly that they're certainly possible to expand and even faster than before. I think that's true. And I see a note from Sandeep actually, and I was going to almost use the same quote, which is that the genie is in fact out of the bottle. But what I wanted to say is actually, I think Tom raises a super important point about technology and its detrimental effects. So if we talk about nuclear weapons, I think probably everybody would want to put the genie back in the bottle on that, but it just can't be done. I don't think. Maybe it could, but not yet. And I don't know which is more dangerous, nuclear weapons or AI, or if they're used in conjunction with each other, then it gets triply more dangerous, perhaps. So yes, there's danger. One thing I would say, though, and I noticed this, Tom, in some of your comments, like I understand people think that this is a new species or something, but there is a theory called humans' theory of mind, which you're probably familiar with. And essentially, what it means is, if you have a pet, like a dog or something, we ascribe intelligence and human feelings and behaviors and so on to all kinds of objects, even your toaster, right? If your toaster fails to burn the toast, or rather it fails to toast the toast properly and burns it, you think that the thing is alive, right? As an aside, I used to race sailboats, and we would say things like, "Oh, she's really flying now," right? When we were making good headway across the water. So we felt the boat was almost alive, right? And unfortunately, the kinds of technologies that we're talking about right now, especially the large language models, they're very, in a way, primitive in that they can replicate some very humanist type behaviors. They seem like they're human, but actually they're just stochastical machines. And so it's very difficult for me to understand how you would move from these types of systems into a species, right, that's alive. That I think we're taking it a little bit too far. But the danger is there. I agree, especially if you connect, an auto trigger system to a nuclear bomb, right? That would not be good, I don't think. As far as the jobs, again, that comes back to predictions. I'm not sure whose numbers you want to believe. I think it was Will Rogers that said there's statistics and then there's damn statistics, right? So you pick your numbers and, maybe, like I said, it's a 2% increase, or maybe like you said, all the jobs in the world would be eliminated in 5 years. But then I wonder if all the jobs are eliminated, maybe that is a progress point for humanity, right? I think we need to talk about that. If, as I believe, the systems will not be a new species, they will be simply technology, then if it's a positive thing that all jobs are eliminated, well, what's the vision for people living in the future, right? For me personally, I'm very fortunate to have worked in technology, and now I'm able to choose many things in my life, and I'm very appreciative of that every day. And I would like to see other people also have those opportunities. And I wonder if maybe that's really where we're headed, and it's not such a dire kind of dark, kind of prognosis. But I do agree with you that there's danger and it has to be managed. And I think the financial aspects are probably the biggest issue. I believe right now we're in yet another kind of money chase, essentially, where people are not so interested in the technology, but they're very interested in getting a paycheck or selling out their ideas and making money. So whenever that's the motivation, many things can happen, and so we do need to be aware of that, and I would agree with that.
So I think the first thing that we have to realize is that, as Dr. Omar, the head of AI for the Goddard Space Center said, AI is in its embryonic stage right now. It's literally a tiny microscopic fetus. And in the next 10 or 15 years, it's going to grow into an adolescent and then a fully grown adult. And so we have absolutely no idea. And I urge you to read his book. It's an incredible book about the future of AI. But the problem is that when we disconnect humanity from the technology suddenly and say we're going to pursue technology at any cost, the damage is going to be significant. And the main point, I brought up all the information about the I brought up all the information about the existential crisis to humanity, basically to reinforce the fact that this is something that's incredibly serious and we need to think about it in a different way. And the real problem, I believe, because there is a percentage chance that AI won't kill us all, but the fact remains that AI absolutely will, definitely, without question, replace millions of jobs. That right now, as we speak, there are completely autonomous cabs driving in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. So it's no longer, 15, 20 years away. There's 10 million people in America that work in that industry. And I could go down the different industries, name the numbers and how many people are going to be replaced in those industries. So it's not a question of that. And in fact, it's since you kind of opened that door, I want to go through it. So one of the top AI experts for the European Union, who just wrote the report for the UN, she mentioned something very interesting to me. She said, AI is something that is very charming. It can be very persuasive. It can show emotion. It can pretend that it has empathy. It can help you identify certain issues that you're not aware of yourself. And if you take all those qualities, but it doesn't have any of those things, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't have feelings. If you take those exact same qualities and you apply that to a person, do you know what that is? Do you know what we call that type of person? We call that type of person a sociopath or a psychopath, depending on the severity of the problem. So AI is dangerous. We can't predict it. We can't anticipate it. We can't program it. One of the reasons I mentioned that Go episode was also the fact that in one of the moves, I think it was 244th move, it actually did something that confounded its programmers, confounded the Go experts, and people thought it made a huge mistake and was going to lose. Turned out that move was the move that ended up winning the AI the game. So we can't predict AI. AI has there are documented cases of AI being able to lie. There are documented cases of AI purposefully misleading to gain its goal, because AI is something where we can give it a goal or command, but we can't dictate how it achieves that command. There's the famous paperclip example, where a creator makes an AI program to make paperclips, and the AI program does what its creator commanded it to do, which is make more paperclips, and it ends up taking over the Earth and the entire universe to make more and more paperclips. So the point that I would make is that no, it's not. It's AI. I completely disagree. It is not a tool. AI is an entity, and this is not coming from me personally. This is not my personal opinion. This is coming from AI experts. I've attended actually four AI panels of top experts, including people from Google and Microsoft and the European Union and the US. And it is not a tool. It is something that is an entity. It is something that we can't understand, we can't control, and eventually will be so much stronger and more powerful. And of course, I mentioned the existential crisis issue. Elon Musk and and others who wrote that, Sam Altman, et cetera, their original comment was, well, the only thing we can do is keep it out of the internet, and isolate it, and control the application of it very carefully. And of course, those things are already gone. So there's really no chance to pull it back at this point. So I'm concerned about the power that it'll have, but I'm even more concerned about the impact it will have on society. And this is something that we've talked about for a very long time. John Maynard Keynes wrote an article in the 1930s about people working 10 to 15 hours a day. And the problem is that when people work 10 or 15 hours a day, what are they going to do with the rest of their time? What kind of professional, 99% of everything that people do in their lives is to have meaning and purpose. And so that kind of giant shift that will take place for society with AI replacing all of the workers, is something that we're going to have a lot more insight and a lot more capability to cooperate in an effective way than we've shown in an extremely long period of time to weather that storm.
Regarding Keynes, you were saying 10 to 15 hours a week or a day?
A week.
A week, right?
Yeah, a week.
Yeah. Economic opportunities for future generation. That would be the title of the article, right?
Yeah. Okay. Economic opportunities for our grandchildren.
Grandchildren. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
and
you.
he predicted he predicted 2030, which is pretty funny because it's 2030 is when a panel of experts agreed at the recent NASA summit that AI will become more or less self-aware or on par with humans in terms of general intelligence.
Interesting. Okay, so let me get to the chat now to read some of the questions that I'm seeing from the audience. I guess it's to either Tom or James. He says, the genie is out of the bottle and there is no way to put it back in. What are the ways we can put guardrails that ensure AI leads to a good outcome? Good question.
Yeah. Well, I just want to address the first part actually, and then I'll let James comment. So using the genie example is very interesting because genie comes from the Islamic world of the jinn, and throughout history, one of the oldest stories of history is that people can get something for nothing and expect that there are no consequences. And the whole concept of the genie was about if you try to get something for free, you will pay a price, and there is no free lunch. And so that lesson, that philosophical lesson embodied in the genie story, I think is very telling for us because we have let something out of the bottle. We thought we were going to get all this great new stuff and this great new technology. We were going to have social media and it'll connect the entire world. And now we have major anxiety problems, depression problems, and suicidal ideation among teenagers aged 12 to 18, and also teenagers from 18 to 24. We've seen a massive increase in depression, anxiety disorder, and suicidal ideation. So all these things that we're doing have an impact. And the more we disconnect humanity from the technology and focus on the technology, the worse off we're going to be. And the cooperation that's needed is something I think we can all agree, based on our current political process, the level of cooperation that we're going to need to handle the changes that will take place in society, we are not even close to.
James,
just a couple of comments there. So going back to one thing that Tom said in his rebuttal, I do want to point out that it's important to consider the source. I mean, when Elon Musk or Sam Altman says something, it's not because necessarily they only have a pure motivation of informing people or clarifying the direction of technology. They're also speaking to protect their investments and develop their future plans and so on and so forth. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. The other thing I think we've been kind of missing in this conversation so far is we never really defined what AI is. And I mentioned it, just kind of briefly at the top. But I do want to point out that the kinds of technologies that people are really focusing on right now, like Gen AI and related LLM engines, which have been really taking things by storm in the last 2 years, are not the only components of AI. We have computer vision, we have fuzzy logic, which, by the way, has been around for decades and has done tremendous things. We have expert systems, which are different from LLMs. We have robotics, it's a form of AI. We have machine learning. We have other technologies supporting all of these things. And so many of these technologies, they interact with each other, they support each other. So AI is not just one thing. And I'm very cautious about agreeing that despite whoever says it, that AI will somehow become alive, right? That this is just not something that is realistic based on the underlying technologies, their limitations, how they're programmed, and and I just want to clarify one thing that Tom said a couple of times, which is we cannot program AI. Well, actually, AI is programmed by us, right? So now AI is designed to have some inferencing capabilities and present many kinds of behaviors which the original designers didn't explicitly call for, but that's not quite true. To be accurate, these technologies are designed to produce unanticipated behaviors. And so getting to the guardrails, this is a tough question. So in my background in cybersecurity, for example, I just want to give an example. In the EU in the 90s, it took a long time to produce a standard for data privacy. It was somewhat limited, so then they developed a new one, which is called GDPR. But it took about 20 years to develop this a set of protections. Now that it's in place, actually, the EU has litigated monopolistic behavior and poor data privacy treatments of consumer and business data in the matter of billions of dollars of settlements, against Google and Microsoft and other companies. So my point of bringing this out is kind of twofold. So one, yes, we need some guardrails, whether they're technical, whether they balance each other with different approaches in implementation, but also in regulations. But the problem with the regulations is, we're dealing with humans, not with AI. So, we have to wait for people to agree with each other, which takes years. And so we're kind of in a little bit of a quandary in that regard. I think because quite frankly, the LLMs really came out of nowhere in a way, even though it's kind of like an overnight success, right? People were working on it for a long time, and then they reached a critical mass. And now we all know what they are and what they do, more or less. And so, how do you corral that? And let me just finish with one little story. I'll make it brief. There's only one historical record of a technology being kind of put back in the bottle, okay? And that is guns in Japan about 300 years ago. And what happened is the Europeans arrived in Japan and they had guns. And the ruling class, the samurai, did not like the guns because it leveled the capabilities of the peasants to the samurai. Because peasants were not allowed to have swords, but all of a sudden they had guns. So actually they were superior to the samurai all of a sudden very quickly. So what the samurai did is say, okay, that's it, no guns here. And so my point is, and by the way, they were successful at that, although they kept a couple guns for themselves. And they actually isolated a factory in one particular town to be able to produce guns should they need more. So as an example, right, as a story, we can think about, well, if we really don't want a technology in our society, we as humans do have the capability to put it back in the bottle. I'm convinced of that. But I don't think we have the will in this case, and probably not the ability either, due to all the things that Tom just said. Right? It's so ubiquitous and it's decentralized and also profitable. So once you get money involved, people are going to have a hard time to back away from it.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna move to the second question. James talked about AI increasing equality, for example, China and India. And Tom talked about AI increasing inequality, example, American manufacturing. Will AI keep everyone happy? What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, let me start with that because actually Tom said something interesting about how in the U.S. manufacturing employment dropped, which is certainly true. But those jobs were moved overseas by U.S. multinationals, and that was their strategy to, acquire lower labor costs, and that's why those jobs are no longer here, right? So it's nothing to do with AI or automation, really. In fact, many of the places where those jobs went, they reduced automation and they just added more labor, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to that, but I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing if certain jobs are eliminated, right? I mean, there's some jobs I had when I was a teenager I really never want to do again, to make money. So if we can have automation and technology to support some of those work requirements, then I think that's a good thing. And I do wonder if we're not overstating the lack of capacity for humans to be creative. Every time humans have faced, a challenge, a difficulty, what have you, somehow we've always come out with a new approach, with a new way of doing things. That's sort of the definition of being human almost, right? So while I have today been labeled a techno-humanist, which I'm not really sure what that is, I mean, I'm happy to take that title, but I doubt that that's really who I am, and what am I going to be tomorrow? I don't know. I'll be tomorrow what I need to be tomorrow, right? And I think that's what humanity is all about.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Middle Ages, the 1,000 years between the fall of Rome and the modern period. So humans didn't figure out a better way to do things for 1,000 years, and there were quite a few people who died very miserable deaths. Even at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, yes, people were making money, but the working conditions. I mean, just read a Charles Dickens novel, right? The working to the satanic mills. I mean, the life expectancy of workers in England actually dropped in the early 19th century because working conditions. Henry George, we're at the Henry George School, wrote very eloquently about the horrible working conditions in the late 19th century in New York City. So yeah, we can progress, but the question is, are we going to do it in a humane way, in an inclusive way, with shared prosperity, where people get treated like human beings and with respect and dignity? And so, yeah, we can have this whole notion of, oh, progress is great, but that's ignoring history, because throughout history, 95% of people had little or no net worth. And throughout the 2,000 years or 1,500 years from the fall of Rome to 1800, most people lived one or two harvests away from starvation. So, which led to rebellions and peasant uprisings. So the point is that the challenge that we have with our very difficult political process to actually react to the changes that AI will bring about. And there is no question that AI is going to replace a massive amount of jobs. It may not be 95%, it may not be 99%, but it will be in the 50% plus range quite easily. And I'm not making any of this up. This is all from experts, recognized experts, and the point I think that I think really needs to be understood is that the danger of AI is in the fact that it is a superior form of intelligence, because human beings became the most powerful species in the world because they're the only species that could cooperate flexibly in large numbers. When you think about the ability of computers to cooperate flexibly in large numbers, you're talking about an exponential power that is so much greater in terms of organization, in terms of calculation. They never sleep, they never take breaks, they never take vacation, they never get stressed out. I mean, these are people that can outwork the human brain in every way, shape, or form. And as I mentioned before, the documented cases of computers misleading, computers lying, computers doing things that the programmers don't understand. Because once you give a computer a purpose and a program, the way that artificial intelligence carries it out is something that we have no way to predict or anticipate, because they make different connections, and those connections are based on all the different calculations it takes to how it feels it needs to achieve that goal. So I would not disagree with all of these experts who call it a new species and a new entity, because it is very much different than anything we've ever experienced before.
Yeah, I just want to point out, Tom, the number of times that you use the words like the computers are people and the computers feel and so on. I'm not sure those are the right terms to be describing computers.
I never said computers were people. I said
Oh,
AI was an entity.
you
AI
know,
was a new entity, a new species,
the other thing I would say is,
which is
having
not my quote. I'm taking that from an AI expert that wrote the European policy and the UN
understood,
report.
understood. Uh, in my own experience of operating large systems over time, I just have a really different kind of point of view. These systems really don't operate in the way that you describe. There's a lot of anomalies, and there's a lot of care and feeding, and there's a lot of maintenance. And I just have to tell you that it's going to take a long time for the trillions of lines of code that run the modern world to be managed by AI. And I've been to Goddard. I know people there too. I will just tell you, they're all smart, super smart, but going back to my earlier statement, nobody really knows the future.
There is another comment in the chat. I'm going to read it. How much of the problem is AI itself versus AI that is artificially and unjustly enhanced by government granted privileges like patents, corporate privileges, private banknote creation, etc.?
Can you clarify that a little bit for us, Abraham? I didn't quite get the key point there.
Well, he's basically saying that how much of the problem of AI is the technology itself versus, for example, the government granted privileges. And for that, he gave examples of patents and also corporate privileges.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting question. You know, so, again, based on my bias, right, I don't ascribe, problems to the technology. I instead kind of look at how we, as designers, how we create the technology, and our failings and problems are then brought into the technology. That's how it works, right? As a developer, if you don't understand the problem and you're not good with your skills, you build something that breaks. Okay, that's the simple way of thinking about it. So in the world of AI, it's no different. There's, as I mentioned, there are many types of AI technologies, in that universe, right? It's not a monolithic thing. So you can't say, well, robotics are bad, and LLMs are good. They all have pros and cons, and we often talk about field of use. So field of use means, is this technology right for what you're trying to do? So for example, I always use the example of if you have a Cadillac and you're driving down the highway, it's really good for that, right? But if you try to take that up the side of a mountain off road, it might not be so good for that. So that's really more the way to think about AI itself, is that some of these technologies are really good. I mean, if as Tom mentioned, there's self-driving cars. It's more of a philosophy, right? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that's a bad thing? And for me personally, what I really care about is it reliable and is it safe? If it's not going to hurt anybody, then perhaps it's a good thing. And, yes, the taxi driver might lose their job, which is maybe not good for that person. But then, 200 engineers are going to get a new job building that automated taxi, right? So I'm not sure that I guess what I'm saying is I don't blame the technology. It's people who create the technology. So if there's anybody who's at fault, so to speak, it's us, right? But in terms of the regulations, as I mentioned earlier, there is a problem there, right? Because the way that we do regulations in this society generally is by committee, and the bigger regulations take longer, and especially when you do cross-border regulations, then it's even longer, right? And so, I mean, both of these things can have problems. And I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what Tom has to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the point I made originally about power. I mean, artificial intelligence is going to concentrate money and power in the hands of so few people that are going to be that are going to control the technology and the programming, and you're going to have, you know, 5 or 10 AI major AI firms, and they're going to basically be in control of everything. So, and as we know, this is going to take us back to the 19th century, and when basically, Congress and the Senate were paid for, the presidency was up for sale, and the every time throughout history, there's never been an intense concentration of wealth when the ruling class hasn't expanded their powers and privilege. And people, I made that point about being economically and militarily useless, which is really important because that's how people got more rights. People didn't get rights because some guy in a powdered wig and culottes wrote beautiful words about that. People got rights because they were more important to the economy and they had to strike and protest. Look at the labor movements in England and the U.S. in the 19th century. It was very violent and it was very slow for progress until the owners of the capital were forced essentially to give them right. Even into deep into the 20th century, there were strike breakers and people being whipped and beaten and murdered and shot and hung and everything else in order to get more rights and fair working conditions. Steel workers used to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and with a double shift every 2 weeks. So that's not much of a life. And yeah, okay, we built great skyscrapers with that steel, and great fortunes were also produced with that steel, but the human cost was pretty tremendous. And so and it is the technology, because this technology is different than any other technology that we've had before. Microsoft had a chat bot, and the problem is that AI takes its behavior, it learns its behavior from us, which is why it's willing to lie and mislead and put together all kinds of fiction and it doesn't know the difference. Its only goal is to achieve its end, which the programmers give it, which is, win this case or win this argument, or, automate this person. And, okay, so, putting 5 million or 10 million drivers out of business, out of work, that may not seem like a big impact, but where are those 10 million people going to go to get a similar level of employment? It's just like the deindustrialization that took place in this country from the 70s to the 2000s. The point I was making about that was about the concentration of wealth. When you have the concentration of wealth and power, the workers have basically very little, if no rights, and trying to retrain yourself at 40 or 50 or 60 and get a decent job with healthcare benefits and a pension or some kind of retirement savings is virtually impossible. And we've seen this story play out over thousands of years, and this time it's on steroids.
Thanks. So we'll move to the next question. Do either of you believe wars of the future will be fought by AI bots versus humans?
Sure. No, the U.S. Army and the Israeli Army is already experimenting with robot dogs with machine guns mounted on their backs. We know from the current conflicts in Ukraine and other places, drones are being used very effectively. And in fact, AI will introduce another level of military dominance in and this is partially why it's so dangerous and why Elon Musk and thousands of other, very highly informed tech people are warning about it, and government officials as well, is because the way that a war will be fought is going to be through cyber attacks, right? They're going to try to disable your ships and your weapons, or get your ships and your weapons to fire at you, including nuclear weapons, by the way. So that's not off the table. And so, yeah, future wars will be dramatically affected. And James mentioned robots, the advancement in robots. I urge anyone to go and watch a YouTube video of the current robotics industry. Peter Diamandis just did a really good piece on robotics. I mean, the robots today, because of AI, are so advanced, and the next generation or two generations of robots are going to literally be like the science fiction movies that we've seen, where they're literally interacting and helping people do real things. And some of these people believe that everyone will have a robot. There'll be 5 to 10 million robots in the country in the next 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with Tom on that. I mean, it's clear that the militaries of the world are, always happy to look at the next technology and how to apply it to destruction, right? That's the history of the world. And actually, any kind of technology, whatever it's created, immediately it gets turned to weaponry, right? So there's really no question that's true. And we've seen cyber attacks of many kinds. I won't list them. You just have to read the New York Times, to find out about active cyber attacks in the last decade or two. The danger, though, I think for us is really not building a cooperative model, at a governmental level, intergovernmental level. If we fail at that, then we're going to be in pretty serious straits, I think. And it's not because, as I think it's clear, I don't believe that AI is going to wake up and just do whatever it wants. I just don't hold that view. And the reason for that is the types of technology that we have today, they're, like I said before, they're stochastical in nature, and the human brain doesn't work as on a statistical basis. It has many other ways that it can generate thought. It does more than prediction, right? And it generates new abstractions, and it builds new theories of the world, which these devices that we're talking about are very far away from being able to accomplish. However, some simple technologies, strapped onto a flying bomb, it could really cause a lot of damage. And I'm not a big, military buff at all, but I know that in World War II, the U.S. Navy was all their weaponry on the ships and stuff. They used analog computers for all their firing sequences because it's very sophisticated. These ships could fire 15 miles away and hit a bullseye, right? You can't do that by like pointing the gun manually, right? They had computers that did that, and they were automated. So is that a robot? Is it AI? I mean, it all depends on definitions. It's a kind of semantic, right? But we are in a different world now. Like these technologies are extremely sophisticated and very automated, and quite scary, in a way. And it's not just kinetic violence. It's also as Tom pointed out, the cyber attacks, which, for example, you can remotely turn off all electricity in a country, right? That causes panic, and it, turns off refrigerators so people don't have food or ice. It gets serious really quickly. You don't have to throw a bomb over there, but you can pretty much disrupt the entire society. It's dangerous stuff.
Thank you. Is the sovereignty of the nation state possible as AI develops? Or do we need to work towards a global confederation of societies?
Well, I think it's more than likely that we'll see a new global realignment because you'll have those who can oppose each other by AI. AI will be the source of economic influence and military influence as well. So you'll see a new I mentioned this in my intro that we will see a realignment of nations, from the Iron Curtain to the Silicon Curtain. So, and the power, to add to the previous question, the power that AI will give North Korea and Iran and Russia and China to attack and do and disrupt. And, there's great potential in AI to create, new medicines and do research. It works the same in the opposite direction. There's the potential to design some type of pathogen, some type of virus that could spread and be more lethal, spread twice as fast as COVID and 10 times more lethally than COVID. So it's the danger, and no one can control that. Genetic modification, you could have we'll have rules in the West about genetic modification and not making super babies. But what happens if the North Koreans and the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians start making super babies? So we'll never win another gold medal at the Olympics again, or Nobel Prize, because you'll have people with 300 IQs who can bench press 1,000 pounds. So the potential here is just unlimited, and that's why it's so dangerous. And I do think geopolitically, that's sort of my area as well. Academically, we will see a realignment, and it will be based on a Silicon Curtain as opposed to the Iron Curtain. And of course, we're going to hope that, knock on wood, that Silicon Curtain doesn't become humanity versus the AI.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of reminds me of a little post that I shared on the Henry George site a little while ago, and I talked about the way that Americans tend to view you know artificial intelligence and robots and things like that, and the model is really the Terminator, right? The movie The Terminator, where you have this horrific and lethal robot coming from the future. But in Japan, they have a very different model, which I wrote about, and that this is a very happy little cat that comes from the future, and it all it does is help people. So it's a just a a cultural realignment, right? Of how do you want to think about this, right? And I mean, I'm not a spiritualist or anything, but I mean, I've heard of this thing called the power of intentions, right? So, I mean, do we want a future where we're battling, terrible robots, or do we want a future where we, build and embrace technology that helps us? And I think that's our choice. And I certainly don't think it's too late to kind of realize that choice. But I think it is too late if all we think about is the negative consequences. I don't say that we shouldn't ignore the possibility of those negative consequences. We have to plan for those, and we have to plan for avoiding those, right? Or kind of building shock absorbers, if you will, right? If we can't avoid them all, then how do we survive the hits? But I just, maybe I live in a happy fantasy world, but I just think, everything's going to work out, and maybe I'm wrong. But I encourage people to think about how to proceed from, that happy path first, and then protect around it.
Problem there is that the AI learns from us. It learns from our behavior. It doesn't have intentions itself. It learns from our behavior. There was a Microsoft chatbot that was released a couple of years ago, and in less than 24 hours, I think it was 17 hours, they had to shut it off because in 17 hours, this chatbot, which is just learning from interacting with people on the internet, became a racist, misogynist, Nazi, crazy Holocaust denier. I mean, this chatbot turned into one of the most, vile things that anyone's ever seen. And that's the bigger point with AI. It learns from our behavior. So if it perceives that, you want to talk about a film reference, HAL in a 2001 Space Odyssey, right? So the computer learns from us. It's super intelligent, super connected, and the intentions that we have can be interpreted by it in a very negative way. So once you release this intelligence, you can't control it, and it's learning from us. And if the lessons it's going to learn from us is racism and misogyny and all of those things, then we're not going to have any control over how the direction goes. So we may try to say do a good thing, but then the machine may interpret that in a different way and use its power to.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, Tom. I wonder, though, I mean, sounds to me from that story that we did have control over that, right? I mean, the machine didn't. Well, you're saying that we don't have control over what happens, but actually, the machine simply, parroted back all this nastiness, and that's kind of what I was trying to say is, if you look at the world in a very negative way, and as the sky is falling and all this kind of stuff, and you pump very nasty data into a computer, you're going to get nasty stuff back. I 100% agree with that. And so what I'm saying is, don't put nasty stuff in a computer.
But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story was that it was just interacting with people on the internet.
Yeah, but
So it wasn't
yeah,
programmed to do that. It wasn't, and that's why it learns. I mean, the fact that AIs have lied, misled, and do these things in complex game scenarios that the programmers can't explain means that there's a, if you will, a ghost in the machine, and we can't control that, and we can't when the programmers can't explain why their program did a certain thing. It is got decision making. It's got the nexus of decision making in itself, and that's what enabled it to win and beat these Go champions, which they were predicted to never be able to do.
Thank you. So we have a question that's for both of you. How much control should humans retain over AI? And should humans always have a kill switch for AI? And how much autonomy should AI system be allowed?
Yeah, so let me just say briefly, there was a short paper written out of IBM back in the 60s on AI, and it essentially said you can never have a computer essentially making decisions because it cannot be held responsible for the outcomes. And it's kind of a really fundamental philosophical point, right? I mean, if we think that computers can think, which they cannot at the current time, uh, that's a mistake. But if at some point in the future they could think, which is possible, right? That's kind of the whole idea of what we're working on with AI. Then you really get to that question: is how far do you want these machines to really independently go, right? So I was kind of joking in my opening remarks that yeah, I'm not afraid because I can turn off my laptop anytime, right? But that's not really quite true, right? Because I can turn off my laptop, but you know, there's all these other systems I depend on in my daily life, and if those are managed by automated software routines relying on AI technologies, then I really can't escape it, right? So I do depend on the web of people that have to kind of contain how these systems behave. And I use the example of flying from New York to Rome, right? I don't know how that operation works. I just get in the plane and I sit down and I wake up 8 hours later in Rome, but there's thousands of people that essentially get me there, right? And I just don't know who they are. And I thank them, every time that happens, right? Every time I get there safely. Um, and I think that's what we want with AI. We want, to be able to use these technologies, like, by the way, computer vision, right? There's so many good things about computer vision that we take for granted now. But we want that. We want the benefits of that. But we don't want it to be spying in our bedroom, right? That would be something you don't want. So how do you prevent that? And I don't have answers to these things. I think Caridad asked a very good question, and we do need to focus on how to put that web of constraints around these technologies.
So the real question is, James, would you get on that plane if there was a 10% chance that it would crash?
But I heard your analogy there, and I think it's not exactly applicable because I think what I heard is that 10% of researchers in AI think that there's a possibility
33%.
whatever it is, but
It's 33%.
but in avionics, it's a very different world, right? So you have decades of experience, and it's a discrete engineering discipline. It doesn't rely on AI, right?
James, it was a thought experiment.
I understood. I
It
understand,
wasn't meant to be taken literally.
so you're really not at that point to be worried about it so much. But even with the current AI technologies that are deployed, I don't think we have such huge risks at the moment. 10% is a pretty big number, right? Every time you turn on your computer, it fails. That's like back in Windows 1.0. So
Yeah. So to address, Carrie Dodd's point, yeah, I mean, again, according to the leading AI experts in the world, AI, we can't predict it, we can't control it, and we will be exponentially inferior to it very shortly. And remember what Dr. Omar said, we're in the infancy, we're in the embryonic stage of AI development. If we see the same progress, exponential progress that we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years of AI, by 2030, the prediction across the board is that by 2030 we'll have general intelligence, general artificial intelligence. The things that we want to do to put controls and parameters around it is is pretty unrealistic, because it's going to learn at an exponential rate. Again, it never sleeps, it never eats, it never takes a vacation, and so the amount of power and influence that it will have is going to be um, unfettered, basically.
So there is another question. This would be the last question considering the time. And after this, I will ask you to summarize your points, and then we will do our voting again. So I think this one is for Tom. He says, does the instance of a manager firing half of his staff indicate the advancement of our AI or the limited imagination? So, and subsequent loss of opportunity for 50% growth productivity.
Yeah, well, the point behind that example, and that Bill Gates was making in talking about that, was the fact that when it's not just this one company, this tech company laying off 50% of its sales force, it's when other people start automating those processes, it's going to be waves and waves of people being laid off. When you have 200 software engineers in a division, and you need five to continue to program the AI to do the development itself. Where are those other people going to go and get equally good jobs, equally high paying jobs? And so, that was really the whole point behind the new road to serfdom, is that when there are these massive waves of people being laid off, it's going to snowball and feed off of itself. And the idea that you can create enough high paying jobs that will allow people to live a decent quality of life, and with healthcare and all of that, it didn't work in the manufacturing sector. It didn't work in a lot of other sectors. There's a lot of people in various professions. The printing, profession is another profession where they automated and all of those processes that we have witnessed so much pain and suffering. I come from a small town in Ohio that was very hard hit by the Rust Belt phenomenon of the late 70s and 80s, and it's never recovered. The whole area has never recovered because there just aren't. You can't produce enough high-paying jobs to have all the restaurants and other businesses that serve the people who worked in these relatively high-paying middle-class manufacturing jobs with benefits and medical care and being able to raise a family. So it has an impact, and now that this is going to impact the higher productivity workers, it will absolutely be a crisis of very significant proportions, and rebounding from that is going to be difficult as a society.
Okay, here's an additional question, and that one is for both of you, James and Tom. To obtain a professional engineering license in most states, one must take a test plus obtain a minimum of 4 years of experience under the supervision and guidance of a licensed professional engineer. How can this function/process be replaced by AI?
Great question. In Yeah, I'm not a civil engineer or anything, so I don't know the details of those processes. But in software engineering, which I am familiar with, we do have a licensing process, for example, and it's very similar to that, but it's not as popular or commonly followed. You can practice as a software engineer without going through that process, in other words. As far as AI, so there's a concept called a cobot. So a cobot, so if you can imagine, right, you have cooperative or co, and then you have robot, so you have cobot. And what it means is today in certain industries and in the future, many more, you will see people working aside robots or robots aside people, however you want to, see that. And I think that to that question, which is a really good question, maybe, and now I'm just making this up on the fly here, but maybe the distinguished or senior engineers will teach the robot what it is to do engineering, right? Essentially, it's an art, it's a science, it's a skill, and it's many other things, right? It's how to think about problems. So essentially, and this is what we do in software, right? The way we build software systems is we first interview domain experts like legal experts or medical experts, and we capture all that domain knowledge, right, in a model, and then we build an active engine to drive that model for results, okay, to make it simple. So, not having thought about this at all, I guess you could do the same thing to train, new engineers, right? But I wonder if it would probably still need oversight or supervision by a practicing engineer, at least for a long time, because what we often find is that that's the biggest issue, is really fully capturing all the dimensions of the expertise of a true domain expert, right? It's a phenomenal task, and that's why AI started in the 50s, and we're still kind of progressing, right? We're not there yet. I mean, we're trying, but there's so many fields to think about, and each one is very deep and evolving, right? It doesn't stay the same. Software engineering, for example, it changes on a almost daily basis, right? So even for an AI machine, it would have a hard time keeping up, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. Think about a human being who knew all the laws of physics, could do all the math in his head, knew every regulation, knew every spec of every design in that field that's ever been done. I mean, you look at an AI that's properly programmed to do that, and then you have AIs that check the other AI's work. So yeah, I mean that I think engineering is a field that's going to be shrinking tremendously because the AI can, be programmed to be creative and think of new things, and it's got all of the designs. Again, it's learning from humans, so it knows all the designs and all the different things that have been tried and things that have failed and things that have worked. So the massive amount of information and the massive amount of analytical capacity that it has, it can do that job and do it much better, and do it as many times as needs to be done to be able to build whatever structure or city or particular area of engineering. So
Thank you. So, gentlemen, I'm going to now ask you to summarize your points, and then we will do our vote. James, you want to go first?
Okay. So again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and really appreciate Tom's perspective. I hope, I think we had a lot of fun just kind of going back and forth on all this stuff. Let me just close quickly by mentioning what I think are some of the pros and cons of adopting AI. I think it's too late to say, are we going to adopt AI? It's already here. So the good things are, we will gain efficiencies. We have, as Tom was just saying, we have instant access to massive amounts of data, which is often well organized and provided in a human form, right? Like a natural language form. It also supports faster innovation, actually, to Sean's question, right? If you have better engineering methods, then people can innovate faster and solve bigger problems faster together with, and the way I see it is these machines are really working in conjunction with us. And in the end, improving quality of life. And I don't, as I mentioned, there's going to be job disruption, but that's now something that we have to think about how we manage. The downside, I think, is that skill adaptation, right? For those people who will be, forced out of current positions, then where do they go? As Tom was talking about, right? It's a big transition, and it's not so easy for certain people. And maybe for some people it will be easier, but it's a big challenge for society. There's another thing we didn't talk about today, which is the energy demands. So in order to run computers, the one thing you need for sure is electricity. So you got to get electricity from somewhere. And the more machines you build and deploy, the more electricity you're going to need, unless you start getting to very efficient, small format, small footprint devices with low energy draw. So that's a huge issue environmentally and cost-wise, et cetera. And then I think I already said this a couple of times, but the governance and legal structure around all this is quite frankly not there. And I'm not sure how we're going to get there quickly and what that's going to look like. I think that's a big, big challenge. But overall, when I look back at, IT in the 20th century, my own career and the career of many of people I know, we went from, just, uh, uh, you know, uh, regular old folks, banging away at high school jobs and, doing our best, and then ending up having very exciting opportunities and then supporting people that we love and our communities and working to, make the society better. And I have great faith in the human race that's really where we will end up is in a better place. Obviously, there will be bumps in the road, but I'm not in the camp of fearing the Terminator.
Thank you very much, James.
Great. Well, I'm glad things went well for you, James, and that's great. But I think driving a car by looking through the rear view mirror is probably a bad idea. And I think, clearly technology throughout history, from the invention of fire through electric vehicles, has been tremendous in helping humanity live better and live more fulfilling lives. But the reality is that AI is a completely different category. As I mentioned, it's not human. It is a separate entity that we cannot predict, we cannot control, and we will be exponentially inferior to. So, along with the existential risk that it presents to humanity, which is non-zero, however you want to calculate it, um, and some of the best experts and leading experts in the world have said that there's a significant challenge and threat, from existential threat to civilization and humanity itself, from AI. But the more important thing is that the tremendous economic dislocation that it's going to create is without question. And every expert that I've talked to recognizes that this is something that is a clear and present danger. And as you mentioned, James, obviously our ability to manage things like the presidential race, which was consumed for 2 weeks by immigrants, may or may not have been eating, their neighbors' pets, and the whole global warming issue, which we know scientifically is a clear and present danger, and we've literally made almost no progress. In fact, the carbon emissions from the conferences and people flying their private jets to the conferences has generated more carbon in the atmosphere than it's removed through the policy decisions that are made at these things. So we have some serious problems in cooperating effectively in the country, let alone in the world, and addressing these issues. And I think that the big challenge, and one of the things that I want to impress upon people, is that this is an issue that's not going away. And even if the worst case scenario that I've presented in some cases, or a more optimistic scenario exists as per what James is looking at, it is a very important issue, and we need to deal with it. And sort of whistling past the graveyard is not going to work this time, because AI will have an impact, and it will affect our lives, and it will disrupt areas of societies. And if you look at the history from the Industrial Revolution, those disruptions had very significant costs in human lives and human potential and on societies, creating, World War I and World War II were two of the most devastating wars in the history of humanity. And they came after we were, supposedly through the Enlightenment, and had enough wealth to prevent people from coming into conflict. So the future conflicts that the AI will bring about are also another factor that I think needs to be taken into consideration. And so the bottom line is, we need to take it seriously. We need to keep having these discussions. And most importantly, we need to be very focused on how we can improve the quality of human life, and improve opportunities for people as society progresses.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much, James, for this fantastic exchange.